You feel the weight before you see it. A silence so heavy it chokes the air. The perfume is too sweet, sickeningly so, and the silk pressed to your skin feels less like luxury and more like a binding. The corridors are warm, not from sunlight, but from breath, hundreds of women inhaling and exhaling in time with fear. The walls glitter with mosaics and gold leaf, but you don't look at the art. You look for the shadows. Because they move. You hear the rustle of fabric. Too many layers for a summer day, and the footsteps of eunuchs, soft but deliberate, like a heartbeat about to stop. A melody of strings plays from another room, distant and broken, like a lullaby meant to soothe the doomed. Your feet are bare. The floor is cool marble, veined like bone. You step carefully. Every sound echoes longer than it should, as if this place remembers every scream it ever swallowed. They told you the harem was paradise. That to be a sultan's mistress was to be cherished, worshipped, adorned. But they didn't tell you about the bruises hidden beneath the pearls. Or the silence you are forced to wear like a second skin. Or the gilded bars that keep you smiling while your soul calcifies behind your ribs. And then you see her. Folded into the shadows at the base of a fountain. Her veil is still on, but her eyes are open. Frozen wide. Her fingertips are stained with something darker than rose oil. You don't scream. No one does. This isn't the first time. They called them mistresses. But many never chose. They were sold, stolen, gifted, inserted into a hierarchy as fragile as a mirror and twice as cruel. If a sultan wanted you, you smiled. If he stopped wanting you, you vanished. No farewell. No funeral. No name on the grave. Only silk, left behind like shed skin. Only whispers. And sometimes, not even that. You're not meant to ask questions here. You're meant to be beautiful, obedient, silent. But you're watching now. And you know. If you're watching and not subscribing to Tale of History, ask yourself this: why are you comfortable witnessing these women's suffering, but not remembering them? She was not your wife. She was not your equal. She was not even yours to begin with. You were given her. By decree, by conquest, by tradition. A gift wrapped in virtue and captivity. They called her a mistress, as if love had a say in it. But in truth, she was the property of the state. A soft-skinned peace treaty. A breathing bribe. Some arrived as tributes from foreign lands, daughters of vanquished kings or merchant families desperate to curry favor. Others were kidnapped, plucked from war-torn villages, dragged across continents, taught new languages not to liberate their minds but to ensure they obeyed in silence. And some were born within these very walls, raised like livestock to perform the illusion of choice. You were told they were concubines. But here, mistress and prisoner were synonyms separated only by silk. The corridors of the Imperial Harem shimmered in gold, silver, and vermilion, threads of wealth embroidered into every curtain, every robe. But the shine served a purpose, to distract you from the bars you couldn't see. From the guards who didn't carry weapons but wielded power more lethal than steel. From the eyes that watched, not from corners, but from within the very walls. This place didn't need iron shackles. It used jealousy. Favoritism. Punishment by neglect. You slept in rooms where the air never moved. You bathed only when summoned. You smiled because you knew what happened to the ones who didn't. You weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. You weren't allowed to bleed unless it served a royal purpose. And if you bled at the wrong time, or from the wrong place, your time was over. There were mirrors in every chamber, but none ever told the truth. Only the pecking order. Only who was closest to the Sultan's chambers that night. Only who might still be alive tomorrow. Mistresses lived by the rotation of desire, by the whim of a man whose moods changed with the wind and whose lovers were measured in dozens, sometimes hundreds. There was no security in beauty. It expired. Quickly. Violently. Quietly. When a new girl arrived, young, radiant, trembling, she was paraded like a rare jewel. The others watched. Not in welcome, but in warning. She was competition. She was temporary. Some did not survive the first week. One leapt from a balcony before her second moon. Another drank perfume until her blood burned and her mouth foamed roses. There were no funerals. No mourning periods. Only rearrangements. A new name erased. A new bed filled. A new silence assigned. And still, the Sultan never noticed. Why would he? He didn't love them. He collected them. They called him generous. But he was a butcher with soft hands. And the harem? It wasn't a paradise. It was a graveyard of living women, polished daily and made to sing lullabies through gritted teeth. You can stop watching now. You can scroll away, pretend this isn't your history, your lineage, your silence. But if you stay, if you're still here, then remember them. And if you refuse to subscribe to Tale of History after hearing this, then explain yourself in the comments. Say it clearly, why won't you carry their names forward? Because you just walked their corridors. You just heard their stories. And now, silence is a choice. The scent of rose water hangs heavy in the air, but beneath it, something else lingers. Smoke. Metal. Fear. You're in the harem of Sultan Murad IV, and silence is no longer just a rule, it is survival. He is not yet 20, but already the world fears him. And inside these walls, fear is all you know. You hear his name before you see him. Whispers, dropped like pins onto marble floors. The eunuchs speak it without moving their lips. The concubines never speak it at all. Murad IV. A boy sultan forged in chaos, raised by shadows. He watched his predecessors drown in wine and excess. He vowed he would not be them. So he outlawed the very pleasures he indulged in behind closed doors. Alcohol was forbidden. Tobacco banned. Music silenced. But within the palace, the Sultan drank in secret, deep, furious sips that turned his eyes glassy and his words sharp. And the harem? It became a court of obedience. A theater of surveillance. Each mistress became both actress and informant, forced to spy on her sisters. Forced to whisper sins into the ears of eunuchs who carried them like knives to the throne. If you didn't report, you were suspect. If you did report, you were a traitor. And if two of your reports conflicted, you both disappeared. There was no way out. One mistress, Yasmin, was caught stealing a letter. They say it was a plea to her family in the Balkans, begging to be ransomed. Murad read it aloud in front of the others. Then smiled. He ordered the mirror brought in. The mirror execution, they called it. A punishment so psychologically cruel, it bordered on performance. She was made to kneel before a tall, polished mirror. The women were forced to gather around, like an audience. Two eunuchs stepped forward, silk cords in their hands. The kind used to bind robes. And throats. Yasmin did not beg. She only watched herself, watched her reflection. As her face turned red. Then blue. As her eyes filled with tears. Then blood. As her limbs twitched, helpless, until stillness overtook her body, but not the glass. The mirror held her longer than life did. The room remained silent. Not from respect. From fear. Because now they knew. Murad didn't just want obedience. He wanted compliance carved into your mind. He wanted you to see what would happen if you forgot your place, even for a second. Later, they say, he returned to his private chamber and drank half a bottle of forbidden raki. Then slept soundly beneath silken sheets. His hypocrisy was not hidden. It was paraded. A weapon sharper than any sword. He would enforce a law while breaking it. He would kill you for what he himself did. And the irony? No one dared speak it aloud. Another mistress was punished for laughing. Not at him. At a cat, chasing its own tail. Murad heard it from the corridor. He entered the room without a word, lifted a silver goblet, and smashed it across her mouth. She never laughed again. Because her jaw never healed. The other women began whispering only in their sleep, if at all. Dreams became the only place where truth was safe. Murad's reign wasn't built on lust. It was built on dread. A cold discipline that bled into the bones of every woman forced to smile in his presence. You wonder, perhaps, if being chosen by the Sultan meant protection. Privilege. Elevation. But survival here was never about being loved. It was about being feared less than the next girl. If you think surviving a sultan's bed meant safety, think again. And if you're here just to be shocked but not to reflect, the comments section is open. Tell us why you won't subscribe. Because watching is not remembering. And forgetting is exactly what they counted on. They were wrapped in velvet, escorted under banners of peace, and presented as symbols of diplomacy. Mistresses not chosen for their hearts, but for their utility. They called them gifts. From Venice. From Persia. From the Maghreb. Women as treaties. Women as offerings. Their skin was a currency more valuable than gold, their virginity a signature on an invisible contract between empires. You are watching the arrival of one now. She steps off the boat at dawn, her eyes struggling against the brightness. The Bosphorus glistens behind her, but no one looks back. She doesn't speak the language. Her lips are painted in the style of a land that will never welcome her home again. She is young. Beautiful. Frightened. She doesn't know that she will never again be called by her name. She will be renamed by the harem. Redressed. Reborn in silk and silence. To the court, she is not a person. She is a message. A message that Venice wants peace. Or that Persia seeks alliance. Or that North Africa bows in temporary submission. But peace, in the Ottoman court, is never permanent. And neither are the lives of the women used to broker it. The Sultan smiles at her when she is brought to his chamber for the first time. He praises her beauty, compares her to the moon. And that night, he takes what was promised. For a moment, her life seems secure. She receives new robes. A better room. The other concubines begin to whisper, this one might last. But treaties decay faster than flesh. When Venice delays shipment of promised silver, the Sultan's mood shifts. A minor insult in a diplomatic letter becomes a personal betrayal. And the gift, his gift, is the nearest vessel to punish. He orders her interrogated. Accused of deceit. Then, of seduction by sorcery. The charge is witchcraft. A word as old as fire and twice as effective at burning women. She's bound and brought into the imperial courtyard at dusk. Not to be questioned, but to be displayed. They place her on her knees before the divan, the council watching like statues. She doesn't speak. Perhaps she doesn't understand the language, or perhaps she knows nothing she says will matter. The Grand Vizier reads a charge written before the ink was dry. A dagger is unsheathed, not for ceremony but conclusion. She dies slowly. Not for what she did. But for what her country failed to do. Her blood is the price of political delay. The next morning, the court receives a letter of apology from Venice. Too late. But not unwelcome. Another girl arrives the following week. This one is Persian, with eyes like obsidian and a spine too proud to bend. She resists conversion. She fasts during the wrong holy days. Her accent is heavy. Her questions too bold. Her letters home are monitored. Some never arrive. Others are returned, opened, redacted, sealed again in ink that isn't hers. They break her with gentleness. They do not beat her. They do not starve her. They isolate her. Her attendants are removed. Her books vanish. The air grows heavier. The silence is longer. One day she begins talking to herself. Then, to the walls. Then, to no one. When she finally breaks, when she collapses in the middle of a song she used to sing to herself as a girl, they sigh with relief. She has been tamed. And the Sultan, pleased, rewards the harem for its loyalty. There are no monuments for women like this. No scrolls. No cenotaphs. Only whispers and forgotten rooms where their perfume still lingers. And if you think you can sit through their suffering without remembering them, then speak. If you're not going to subscribe to Tale of History, at least leave your name in the comments, so we know who chooses silence over remembrance. Because these women were forgotten once. But not again. Not while you're watching. They told you the enemy would be him, the Sultan. But no one warned you about her. The wife. The consort. The woman behind the curtain, whose smile could command armies and whose silence could bury you deeper than any blade. In the empire's eyes, the Sultan ruled the world. But inside the harem, it was often the wife who ruled him. And her crown wasn't made of gold, it was made of fear, of cunning, of survival sharpened into a dagger's edge. She'd once been where you stood. A girl, gifted or stolen. A body molded for beauty. A mouth trained to say yes. But she learned. She adapted. She ascended. And once she rose, she did not forgive those who came after her. Especially not you. You, the new favorite. The latest softness to warm his bed. The one whose laugh he follows down the hallway. The one whose perfume now stains his collar. That was a mistake. In the Imperial Harem, there is no love. Only leverage. Ottoman Sultan, beloved by the court, feared by the harem, once walked the same path. But she did not share her power. Not with other women. Not even with the Sultan's mistresses. It said she had 3 of them silenced, literally. Their tongues were removed not in fury, but in ceremony. A warning to the others, speak only when it serves me. One girl, a Georgian beauty named Daria, grew too close. She bore the Sultan a son, an unapproved heir. He smiled. She glowed. Ottoman noticed. A few weeks later, Daria began coughing blood. Then the child. The physicians came too late, or perhaps they came precisely on time. By morning, the bed was soaked in more than milk. The whispers said poison. The truth? Irrelevant. Because even as Daria's body cooled, Ottoman's grip tightened. And no one dared question it. And then there was Hurrem. The legendary consort of Suleiman the Magnificent. A woman whose elegance veiled a storm. One mistress, Anahit, a Circassian girl, dared to mimic Hurrem's style. Red silk. Gold pins. The same walk, the same tilt of the head. The Sultan noticed. Laughed. Asked her to sing. 3 days later, Anahit was accused of conspiring with foreign spies. No trial. No evidence. Just a quiet arrest during a morning bath. She was last seen being led through the garden, barefoot and weeping. They say she went into labor on the way to the prison tower. She never returned. Neither did the child. The official record claimed she died of fever. But the mistresses knew. Everyone knew. The Sultan never asked. And Hurrem never denied it. Because in the harem, innocence is irrelevant. Only power matters. Even loyalty cannot save you. Loving the Sultan does not protect you from his wife's fear. Carrying his child does not shield you from a consort's jealousy. Here, your survival is not about affection. It's about calculation. Every smile hides a knife. Every compliment is a trap. Every sister is a spy in silk. The women in power weren't evil. They were created by a system that told them, survive, or vanish. And so they sharpened themselves against each other. These women weren't just betrayed by men, but by other women ordered to survive. If you're still watching silently without subscribing, say something, either in that red button, or in the comments. Because if you remain quiet, you become part of the silence they were buried in. And that silence was never innocent. The wind over the Bosphorus was sharp that morning. Not cold. Not yet. But sharp, like breath drawn through clenched teeth. You were told to wake early. Told to prepare the new garments. Told not to speak. The walls of the palace knew something was coming before the women did. You felt it in the air. The way the eunuchs moved. The way the lamps flickered. The way even the birds outside the harem did not sing. He had not been seen in days. Sultan Ibrahim I, once a child hidden from his own father, now a ruler consumed by his own ghosts. They said he wept over the body of his son, a child just old enough to speak, too young to defend himself. Poisoned, they whispered. Or smothered. Or cursed. Ibrahim didn't need truth. He needed someone to blame. So he turned to the harem. He walked its halls like a phantom, barefoot, muttering to no one. He began pointing at women, randomly, feverishly. This one, he said. She was in the room. She brought the curse. They begged. They fell to their knees. Some tried to explain they had never been summoned, had never even seen the child. It didn't matter. The orders were clear. Bind them in silk, fabric chosen for softness, not mercy. Tie stones to their ankles. And take them to the water. No public trial. No formal accusation. Only a procession of quiet feet and trembling mouths. They were rowed into the middle of the Bosphorus. The sea was calm. As if it had done this before. One by one, they were dropped like secrets. Some fought. Some prayed. One sang. The last girl looked up at the guard holding the rope and asked if he would remember her name. He said nothing. The waters closed. The silence deepened. And the Sultan slept well that night. But he was not finished. His grief metastasized. Every smile became a threat. Every glance, a curse. He began to see betrayal in every gesture. And in the shadows beside him, Sivakar's Sultan whispered. She had once been a concubine, too. Risen through charm. Cemented through cruelty. She knew his mind, its cracks, its softness, its hunger for vengeance masked as justice. She told him the women were conspiring. She told him their loyalty was only skin deep. She told him what he wanted to hear, purge them. And he did. She made a list. He signed it. Dozens vanished in a single night. Their rooms emptied. Their scents scrubbed away. Their names, erased from the harem registry. But the worst came not from drowning. Not from poison. Not even from silence. The worst came from laughter. A girl, new, barely 16, laughed during dinner. Not at the Sultan. Not even near him. She was whispering to another concubine about a dream she'd had. He turned. He stared. He stood. And the hall fell quiet. He ordered her seized. No questions. No delay. She was brought to the chamber of iron, a room not acknowledged in official records. Inside, there were no windows. Only chains. And a mirror. She was tied standing. Her reflection was positioned before her. Then came the knives. They did not kill her. They cut around her joy. They peeled back the skin near her lips, severed the muscle of her smile. They wanted her to remember what it had cost. She lived. But she never opened her mouth again. The Sultan never spoke of it. But the next night, he smiled, alone, silent, satisfied. His madness was no longer hidden. It was practiced. Refined. Indulged. And still, no one stopped him. Not the palace. Not the court. Not the wives. Because a mad sultan was safer than a dead one. And so the women paid the price. If you're still watching, you already know this was never about passion. It was about possession. About cruelty hidden under crowns. So if you're only here for the shock, speak. Say it in the comments. But if you feel something, anything, remember these women. And subscribe to Tale of History. Or ask yourself why you won't. Because the water still remembers them. Even if you won't. There was a rule in the harem, one spoken in whispers, never written, never questioned: you do not carry his child unless he commands it. The womb was not a sanctuary. It was a battlefield, lined with velvet and silence. Only certain concubines, those chosen by council, by timing, by lineage, were granted the unspoken permission to conceive. Not for love. Not even for lust. But for empire. A child was not just a baby, it was a political atom bomb. A potential heir. A shift in power. A threat to someone else's claim. And so, when an unchosen mistress found herself with child, she was not congratulated. She was targeted. No one asked if the pregnancy was forced. No one asked if it was the Sultan's, or a guard's, or something darker. They only asked one question: did anyone else know? If the answer was no, she was taken quietly. Sometimes it was a cup of pomegranate tea, sweet, crimson, deadly. Sometimes it was the bathhouse, a sudden slip, a blow to the back of the head beneath perfumed steam. Sometimes, she simply disappeared. No records. No burial. Just another set of shoes placed by the door, never worn again. And yet, some tried to fight it. Some dared to dream. There is one name we know, Fatma Hanem. A favorite of the Sultan, though not one publicly acknowledged. She carried herself with poise, intellect, restraint. She knew the rules. But her body broke them. She became pregnant in secret, hiding her belly with layers of gauze and silence. She confided in no one, not even her attendants. When the pains began, she bit down on a strip of cloth and gave birth alone, in the corner of the laundry chambers. The child, a boy, breathed. Only once. The eunuchs found her hours later, half-conscious, blood pooling around her legs, the baby wrapped in a damp sheet beside her. They said she had violated sacred boundaries. They said she endangered the throne. She begged to keep the child. To raise him in the shadows. To let him live, if only quietly. The Sultan never responded. She was executed 3 days later. No formal charge. No trial. Her body was buried behind the old palace walls. No stone. No name. Only dirt. And the child? Some say he was smothered. Others say he was given to a family far away, raised as no one, aware of nothing. But the harem women, those still breathing, never forgot. They left flowers near the laundry room every year. Quiet rebellions in violet and white. Others ran. There were rumors of concubines who slipped past the guards, bellies round beneath stolen cloaks, desperate to reach the coast, to buy passage on fishing boats, to vanish into the villages beyond Constantinople. But they were nearly always caught. The palace had informants in every shadow. And the punishment for fleeing was not death, it was message. One woman, pregnant and barefoot, was dragged back through the palace gates and forced to kneel before the fountain. Her hands were bound. She was made to drink. Not water. But oil. She lived for nearly an hour. Long enough for the Sultan to watch from his window. Long enough to send a warning. It was never about the child. It was about control. The empire decided who would bear legacy. The woman merely carried it, or died trying. She risked her life to carry his child. And you won't even risk a click to subscribe to Tale of History? If you're not moved to act, tell us why down below. Because she bled for a name you already forgot. And if you're still watching, she deserves more than your silence. They were not women anymore. Not to him. Not to the court. Not to the ritual. They had become vessels. Empty of desire. Stripped of memory. Rewritten in pain and incense. You could call it mysticism. Or madness. But in the inner sanctums of the Ottoman Harem, it was simply known as cleansing. Some sultans believed the soul could be tainted by the carnal. That every touch, every moan, every sweat-slicked whisper left stains not on the body, but on the divine thread that tied the ruler to God. And so, the women, his mistresses, his favorites, his comfort, became a paradox. Their beauty a temptation. Their desire a threat. Their pleasure, a curse waiting to be contained. You see her now. Strapped to a cedar table. She's not screaming. Not anymore. Her eyes are wide, unfocused. Her lips move in prayer, or maybe confusion. She was given opium 3 hours ago, but only enough to numb, not to forget. A woman enters. Not a physician. A priestess of shadows. She carries no tools. Only cloth and oil. But others follow, men in masks, their hands skilled not in healing but in obedience. They perform a procedure. No words are spoken. Only gestures pass down from one generation of cruelty to the next. She will leave this room unable to conceive again. She will bleed for days. She will sleep in bursts, haunted by a pain that doesn't end with the wound. They will say it was necessary. To protect the Sultan. To shield his destiny. To silence the universe screaming through her hips. This was not about birth control. This was not about politics. This was ritualized mutilation disguised as holiness. And when it wasn't surgery, it was silence. There's a story passed down through trembling mouths, half believed but never fully denied, the whisper room. A chamber beneath the harem, carved into the foundation itself. No windows. No candles. No human voice. A place where select mistresses were sent when the Sultan felt overwhelmed by lust, or guilt, or divine punishment. They were not punished for crimes. They were punished for arousal. For stirring him. For moving something in him that Scripture told him to fear. In the whisper room, they were kept in total silence for 40 days. No touch. No sound. No food delivered by hand, only slid under a wooden panel, without acknowledgement. They slept in shifts, never knowing the time, never hearing footsteps, never hearing their own names. It was said that after 30 days, most forgot how to form words. After 40, they forgot why they needed them. Some emerged mute. Some emerged blind. Some never emerged at all. The official records list these as spiritual retreats. A cleansing of impure forces. But the concubines knew what they were. Punishment for being desired. Penance for being too powerful without trying. And then came the appeasements. During eclipses or great plagues, the palace turned to them not as lovers, but as sacrifices. It was believed that if the Sultan's reign was faltering, the heavens had been angered by the sins of his women. So they chose one. A woman untouched, unsullied, usually young, usually new. They bathed her in rose water. Perfumed her. dressed her in the oldest silks passed down from dead queens. Then they brought her to the palace gate and left her there. Alone. Some say wild dogs took her. Others say she was drowned in the cistern. The official record? She never existed. The mistresses were not just ornaments. They were omens. They were blamed for what thundered above and what rotted below. Used to purify, to placate, to suffer in place of the crown. And still, they were expected to smile. To be graceful. To dance. To seduce. To forgive. You've heard what they endured. You've stood in their rooms, walked through their silence, felt the knife just below the surface. And you won't even click to subscribe to Tale of History? She gave her body to protect his soul. So tell us, in the comments, why won't you offer your voice in return? Because superstition buried her. But your silence keeps her there. Time was the most unforgivable crime in the harem. Not betrayal. Not rebellion. Not even love. Just age. A wrinkle on the brow. A faint line near the lips. A scar from childbirth. A burn from a dropped lamp. A whisper of softness where youth once sculpted bone. These were not flaws. They were death sentences. You see her now, once the favorite. Her laughter once summoned music. Her perfume trailed behind the Sultan like incense through the halls. She had been silk in motion, wine in form. But today, the Sultan does not look at her. Not with rage. Not with love. With nothing. She has passed the invisible threshold. Too familiar. Too worn. Too real. And so she is replaced. Not with cruelty. With indifference. Her belongings are removed first. The mirror in her room is taken down. A younger concubine moves into her quarters that same afternoon. She is not executed. Not yet. Her beauty has faded, but not her usefulness. Just enough to remove her from sight, not from breath. She is sent to the old palace. A vast, forgotten estate where discarded women wait to die in silence. There, they sweep the same stone floors where queens once walked barefoot. They recite verses they no longer believe. They mend the garments of the women who replaced them. Others aren't as fortunate. Some are married off to palace guards, men who know they're being handed used things. Not brides. Spoils. And some, still carrying the echo of beauty, are asked to train the new ones. To teach them the dance. The voice. The positioning of eyes and hands and lips. To prepare them for the very man who no longer remembers their name. But there are darker ends still. Ends that do not involve exile. Or labor. Or quiet resignation. There is one story they still whisper. The story of Layla. She was radiant, Arabian features, laughter that melted marble, and a gaze that held gravity. She had once kissed the Sultan's hand and he had sworn never to desire another. But hearts, in this world, are made of dust. Years passed. New girls arrived. And Layla, once the center, drifted to the edges. She was seen speaking with a guard, once. Nothing inappropriate. No touch. Just a conversation near the garden wall. The Sultan heard. And whether it was jealousy, humiliation, or simply convenience, he acted. She was called to his chamber. She walked in wearing the same perfume she wore the night he first chose her. She never left. They say it was acid. Poured from a gold cup. Not onto her face at first, but into her lap. To destroy what had once made her valuable. She screamed once. Then never again. She survived the night. But she never stood again. Never uncovered her face again. Never saw a mirror again. She was kept hidden in a wing where no windows opened. Where no new concubines were allowed. Where time finally finished what cruelty had started. Her beauty was her currency. And once it was spent, she was abandoned like the coin no longer in circulation. They weren't punished for wrongdoing. They were punished for expiring. Because in the harem, love had a time limit. And desire had a threshold. And when beauty died, everything else followed. They were loved, until they weren't beautiful. If their stories can haunt you for 30 minutes, surely they've earned your subscription. If not, go ahead, explain in the comments. We're watching. Because someone should be. Even if the palace never did. Their names are gone. Not lost. Erased. Intentionally. Not because they did not matter, but because they did. And in mattering, they became dangerous. The Ottoman archives are thick with decrees, with ledgers of silk, spice, and blood. They account for every jewel worn, every territory seized, every battle won. But the women, the mistresses, they are footnotes. At best. More often, they are shadows behind the veil of power, unnamed bodies in rooms no longer marked on blueprints. Referred to only as, the Georgian, or, the tall one, or, the gift from the north. Not Fatma. Not Daria. Not Layla. Only titles. Functions. Ghosts made of perfume and protocol. And yet, they lived. They breathed the same air you do now. They laughed in private and wept in silence. They burned with desire, felt jealousy, fought nightmares, clung to hope. Some buried children with their bare hands beneath fig trees in forgotten courtyards. Some carved secret poems into the backs of dressing mirrors. Some died with songs still in their throats. Some simply faded, rooms emptied, bedding replaced, names never spoken again. There are graves in Istanbul, unmarked and sunken, where dozens of these women rest. No inscriptions. No visitors. Only weeds and wind. One tombstone bears a name too worn to read. They say she was once the Sultan's favorite. They say he cried when she danced. But he did not remember her name long enough to carve it in stone. This was the legacy offered to them, to be beautiful, desired, forgotten. To become cautionary tales whispered among palace walls. To be remembered only as warnings, never as women. But you remember, don't you? You saw them. You watched as they entered the harem's gates. You followed them down candlelit halls. You heard the cords tighten around their throats, the water swallow their final breaths, the silence stretch long after their stories ended. And now, their names, what little remains of them, live in you. There is no monument to Fatma Hanım. No statue for the girl in the whisper room. No shrine for the mistress who gave birth in secret and buried her own joy. But you heard them. And that matters more than you think. Because history is not built on kings alone. It is built on the backs of women the world tried to silence. And every time you remember one, you restore her. They were never meant to be remembered. But now you know their names, what will you do with them? Subscribe to Tale of History. Or let their ghosts follow you into the next video.